Shalom, welcome, world changers, and thank you again, Hannah, for the beautiful music. That was amazing, amazing as always. Thank you for blessing us with your talent, beautiful music. All right, folks, today we are going to be reading from Ezekiel again, Ezekiel chapter 37, the Valley of Dry Bones. We're going to be talking about the battle of Gog and Magog as we read along here in Ezekiel. I pray that everything that we share here today would be a great blessing to you. Increase your knowledge of the scriptures, your knowledge of the things of heaven, your relationship with God, and your knowledge of the truth. Amen, amen, amen. All right, folks. Yeah, so we are live right now on Twitch. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, BitChute. We are live on Rumble as well. I do have I do have access to the YouTube live chat. So if you guys on the other platforms, if you put anything in the live chat, I may not be able to see it unless you go over to YouTube and look me up over there, Christopher Enoch at YouTube, and you should see that I'm live right now, especially if you're watching live and not a replay of it. So, all right. All right then. Yes, Valley of Dry Bones. We're going to read through this. We're going to talk about some of the manuscript variations of it. And we're going to look at the different interpretations of the Valley of Dry Bones. And so, yeah. In the live chat, we have Calamentos says, Shalom to all. Shalom, Calamentos. Welcome and blessings multiplied to you and yours. Hope everything is awesome there. All right, folks. Okay, so we're going to start with Ezekiel chapter 37. And we're going to read right from the very top, and that is starting at verse 1. And we're going to be getting into some of the manuscript variations later on. This particular chapter doesn't have a whole lot of variations to it, but the next chapter actually has a fair amount of manuscript variations. Let's get into this. This is Ezekiel chapter 37 and verse 1. It says, Yahweh's hand was on me, and he brought me out in Yahweh's spirit, and set me down in the middle of the valley, and it was full of bones. He caused me to pass by them all around. And behold, there were very many in the open valley. And behold, they were very dry. Okay. He said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? I answered, Lord Yahweh, you know. Again he said to me, Prophesy over these bones, and tell them, You dry bones, hear Yahweh's word. The Lord Yahweh says to these bones, Behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and you will live. I will lay sinews on you, and will bring up flesh on you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you will live. And then you will know that I am Yahweh. So we get this again quite often where it says, then you will know that I am Yahweh. Like this is the purpose of all this, is to know that God is Yahweh. Verse 7, So I prophesied as I was commanded. As I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, there was an earthquake. Then the bones came together, bone to its bone. I saw, and behold, there were sinews on them, and flesh came up, and skin covered them above, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, Prophesy to the wind, prophesy, son of man, and tell the wind, the Lord Yahweh says, Come from the four winds, breath, and breathe on these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived, and stood up on their feet, an exceedingly great army. Verse 11, then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried up, and our hope is lost. We are completely cut off. Therefore prophesy and tell them, the Lord Yahweh says, behold, I will open your graves and cause you to come out of your graves, my people, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. You will know that I am Yahweh, when I have opened your graves and caused you to come up out of your graves, my people. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live. Then I will place you in your own land, and you will know that I, Yahweh, have spoken it and performed it, says Yahweh. Okay, so this is the prophecy of the dry bones, and there are at least 6 different interpretations of this. I'm sure most of you have heard at least one of these interpretations. I have always been taught a more of an eschatological interpretation of it, in that these dry bones are literally talking about the nation of Israel. However, there are different interpretations of this, and is we want to be as intellectually honest as possible and intellectually humble as possible. So let's take a look at these different interpretations. There's one called the national or historical metaphor, and this is the primary academic and contextual interpretation. So the interpretation goes like this: the restoration of the Jewish people from the Babylonian exile back to the land of Israel. Excuse me. The bones represent the defeated nation. Another interpretation, number 2, the literal bodily resurrection. So this is a classical Jewish interpretation, and it says that it's a literal physical resurrection of the dead that will occur during the future Messianic age, as debated in the Talmud Sanhedrin 92b. And we'll get to that in just a moment here, folks. Sanhedrin 92b. Number 3, we have modern political and Zionist interpretation. This is the physical recreation of the state of Israel in 1948, often viewed specifically as the national resurrection following the Holocaust. That's basically the one that I have been taught, especially coming from more of a end-time Bible prophecy background, if you will. And number 4, spiritual regeneration, a Christian, just a generic Christian interpretation. So this interpretation says that the spiritual new birth, it's the spiritual new birth of individual believers moving from spiritual death to life through the Holy Spirit. Interpretation number 5 of the Valley of Dry Bones prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 37 is the Christian eschatological interpretation. That says that the future physical resurrection of the dead at the second coming of Christ, and it's the ultimate national salvation of Israel. Okay, so that's another one. Finally, and this is, I'm not saying everything, this is, it's limited to 6, but there's 6 main interpretations of this. Number 6, literal motif. And this is also called the historical-critical interpretation of it. And it simply goes like this: that the Valley of Dry Bones prophecy is a rhetorical and psychological device utilizing ancient Near Eastern divine warrior and restoration motifs to instill hope in a traumatized, conquered populace. All right, well, let me know what you guys think in the live chat there. What have you been taught about the interpretation of the Valley of the prophecy of the dry bones, prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 37? Felix says, hi, friends. Hello, Felix. Welcome and blessings multiplied to you and your family. Hope you're having an awesome evening tonight. Yeah, so let me know in the live chat, what have you been taught? What have you heard about this? How to interpret it? Is it one of those 6 interpretations that I mentioned? Sanhedrin 92b. I said we would go over there. So let's just do a hop, skip, and a jump over there. I'm reading from a website called Sepharia.org. It's SEFARIA.org. I have nothing to do with it. I'm not an affiliate of it or anything like that. But just for your information and for reference and to give credit where credit's due here. So we have the Sanhedrin 92b, and this is what it says about the interpretation of this passage. It says, and if you say during those years when the Holy One, blessed be he, is destined to renew his world, as it is stated, quote, and the Lord alone shall be exalted on that day, in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 11, what are the righteous to do? How will they survive? The Holy One, blessed be he, will make wings like eagles for them, and they will fly over the surface of the water, as it is stated, quote, therefore we will not fear when God changes the land and when the mountains are moved in the midst of the sea. Psalm 46, verse 3. Although God will renew the land, they will not fear, because they will be in the sky over the sea at that time. Lest you say that they will endure suffering from flying uninterrupted for an extended period. The verse states, quote, but they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength, and they shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not tire. The Gematria, the Gemara suggests, and let us derive from the dead that Ezekiel revived. Ezekiel chapter 37, that the resurrected dead will not live forever, but will die at some point. The Gemara explains the school of Eliyahu holds in accordance with the opinion of the one who says, in truth, Ezekiel's depiction of the dry bones that came to life was a parable, from which nothing can be derived with regard to the nature of resurrection. This is, as it is taught in a Bereta that Rabbi Eliezer says, the dead that Ezekiel revived stood on their feet and recited song to God and died. And what did they recite? The Lord kills with justice and gives life with mercy. Rabbi Yehoshua says that it was this song that they recited. The Lord kills and gives life. He lowers to the grave and elevates. This is in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 6. Rabbi Yehuda says, Ezekiel's depiction of the dry bones that came to life was truth, and it was a parable. And by the way, folks, a parable is never to be taken literally. Paragraph 4, Rabbi Nehemiah said to Rabbi Yehuda, if it was truth, why do you prefer it to it as a why do you refer to it as a parable? And if it was a parable, why do you refer to it as truth? See, this is the thing. So apparently the word truth here it suggests in this context a literal interpretation of it. So we know that parables are not literal. And so this is why it says, if it was truth, why do you refer to it as a parable? So parables are not literal historical truth per se. it is a parable is usually a story or some kind of a basically some kind of fictitious uh, story that is told to teach a deeper truth or meaning, or even perhaps even an emphasis on a certain concept. Yeah, so if it was truth, why do you refer to it as a parable? And if it was a parable, why do you refer to it as truth? Rather, it means, in truth, it was a parable. Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Yoshe Hagalili, says, not only was it not a parable, but the dead that Ezekiel revived ascended to Eretz Yisrael and married wives and fathered sons and daughters. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera stood on his feet and said, I am a descendant of their sons, and these are phylacteries that my father's father left me from them. The Gemara asks, who are the dead that Ezekiel revived? Rav says, these were the descendants of Ephraim who calculated the time of the end of the enslavement and the redemption from Egypt, and erred in their calculation. They left before the appointed time and were killed, as it is stated, quote, and the sons of Ephraim, Shutela and Bered, his son, and Tahath, his son, and Eliada, his son, and Tahath, his son, and Zabad, his son, and Shuthela, his son, and Azer and Eliad, whom the men of Gath that were born in the land slew, because they came down to take their cattle. In 1 Chronicles chapter 7, verses 20 to 21. And it is written, quote, and Ephraim their father mourned many days, and his brothers came to comfort him, unquote. That is found in 1 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 22. And Shmuel says, these dead that Ezekiel revived were people who denied the resurrection of the dead, as it is stated, quote, then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried and our hope is lost. We are cut off, unquote. This is found in Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 11. God tells Ezekiel that these people who had lost hope, that these were the people who had lost hope for a resurrection. Rabbi Yirmeiah bar Abba says, these were people in whom there was not even the moist residue of the mitzvah, as it is stated, quote, the dry bones hear the word of the Lord, unquote. Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 4. Even during their lifetime, they were comparable to dry bones. Gnostic Native says, good evening, Christopher and chat. Good evening, good evening. Welcome and blessings multiplied to you. Hope you're having an awesome evening. Chipmunk says, shalom, everyone. Beautiful job, Hannah. Shalom, Chipmunk. Welcome and blessings to you as well. Hope you're having an awesome day there. Yeah, so we're reading Sanhedrin 92b. This is an ancient Jewish interpretation of the prophecy of the dry bones of Ezekiel chapter 37, that infamous prophecy of the Valley of Dry Bones. Reading on in Sanhedrin 92b, it says, Rabbi Yitzhak Napaha says, these are the people who covered the sanctuary with repugnant creatures and creeping animals, as it is stated, quote, so I entered and saw, and behold, every form of creeping animal and repugnant animal and all the idols of the house of Israel etched upon the wall around, unquote. This is Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 10. And it is written there with regard to the prophecy of the dry bones, quote, and he passed me over them around and around, Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 2. By means of a verbal analogy between around in one verse and the identical term in the other, it is derived that the two verses are referring to the same people. Rabbi Yochanan says, these are the dead from the Dura Valley. This is referencing Daniel chapter 3. Rabbi Yochanan says, these corpses filled the area from the Eshel River to Rabat, which constitutes the Dura Valley, as at the time that Nebuchadnezzar the wicked exiled as at the time that Nebuchadnezzar the wicked exiled the Jewish people to Babylonia, there were among them youths who overshadowed the sun with their beauty, and the Chaldean women who would see them and desire them and discharge the flow of a zava. These women told their husbands, and their husbands told the king. The king ordered the youth executed, and his servants executed them. And their execution did not resolve the problem, as the women were still discharging the flow of a zava. Even after death, the youth's beauty remained intact. The king ordered that their corpses be taken to the valley, and his servants trampled them so that their form would no longer be visible. The sages taught in a Bereta that, at the moment that Nebuchadnezzar the wicked cast Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah into the fiery furnace, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Ezekiel, go and revive the dead in the Dura Valley. Once Ezekiel revived them, the bones came and struck Nebuchadnezzar, that wicked man, in his face. Isn't that interesting how every time it mentions Nebuchadnezzar, almost every time, I just see the next time here, but it says so much like Nebuchadnezzar the wicked, Nebuchadnezzar the wicked, Nebuchadnezzar the wicked man. Now it doesn't say that here in the next few mentions. Nebuchadnezzar said, it says here, what is the nature of these? His servants said to them, the friend of these three, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, is reviving the dead in the Dura Valley. Nebuchadnezzar began and said, how are his signs, and how great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. Daniel chapter 3, verse 33. So I'm going to continue to read here, but here's a question to ponder. So if you're just joining us here, we already read the entire prophecy of the Ezekiel chapter 37, the valley of dry bones, and the interpretation of it according to Ezekiel chapter 37, and we went through 6 different modern interpretations of it, the second of which is the second one, the literal bodily resurrection, the classical Jewish interpretation, saying that it's a literal physical resurrection of the dead that occurred during the future messianic, that will occur, during the future messianic age. It says, as debated in the Talmud Sanhedrin 92b. So we're reading this passage for ourselves to see exactly what it says. So, it seems to me like the Jews take things more literally then I think that they can miss a lot of things when they take it too literally. You know what I mean? For example, taking the prophecies of the Mashiach too literally, they would say definitely that Yeshua of Nazareth did not fulfill that, because he didn't bring peace. He didn't bring back the exiles. All that kind of stuff. He didn't sit on the throne of David. He didn't become king. All that kind of stuff. All those arguments. And that's if you take it literally. But if you take it figuratively or spiritually, one could argue that Yeshua did fulfill that. Let me explain. So he brought in the exiles, spiritually speaking. He went out as a shepherd, finding the lost sheep and bringing them back into the fold, back into the kingdom. So the spiritual exiles back into the spiritual kingdom. He did bring peace, okay? The Prince of Peace, as he's commonly called in Christian circles. He is a king, a spiritual king that is greater than any earthly king could ever be. Because being a spiritual king, as he said, my kingdom is not of this world, according to the Gospel of John. Being a spiritual king, that means that it's not limited to just the earth. If you want to look into the future, and if you want to look at, so will the earth ever come to an end? What do you guys think in the live chat? Will the earth ever, do you think that laying aside all of your eschatological views, let's just say in 1 billion years, will the earth still be here and be recognizable as we know it? Some Christians would argue, some Bible students would argue that, well, it says that the earth will pass away. It says in the scriptures that the earth will come to an end. Scientifically speaking, they say the earth will be basically swallowed up by the sun. So if that's the case, if Yeshua, if his kingdom is an earthly kingdom, then that means his kingdom is not forever. But if his kingdom is a spiritual kingdom, and if it transcends the earth, if you look at it, again, scientifically speaking and cosmologically speaking, according to all of the instruments that we have now, which really is nothing compared to the entire universe, but the earth is so incredibly small compared to the known universe, and they're still finding more and more and more and more and more and more and more. Some scientists even say that the universe is even limitless, or it goes on forever. There's no end to it. There's absolutely no end to it. It's just it's an infinite universe, as some scientists would speculate. If that's the case, the earth is really it's less than a drop in the ocean. It's so incredibly small. It's infinitesimally small. It's so small we can't even think about how small it is. We can't even fathom how small it actually is. And if it's true that Yeshua's or the Mashiach's reign, any Messiah would be first of all global, encompass the entire earth, and limited to the earth, in the sense that the kingdom is not outside of this earth, but only within the earth, geopolitical kingdom, then how small is that? Incredibly small. Gnostic Native says, I don't know about how long, but hundreds or thousands. Yes. Yeah, all right. Well, thank you, Gnostic Native. Clifton says, blessings, Christopher. Time flies. It's 26. Now, before you know it, it will be 33. And perhaps 2033 will be exactly 2,000 years. Well, welcome and blessings multiplied to you and your family, Cliff. Good to see you. Thank you for your chat. Al says, shalom, everyone. Great blessings every day. Shalom, Al. Blessings multiplied to you and your family. Hope you're having an awesome day there. Cubert says, shalom. Shalom, Cubert. Welcome and blessings multiplied to you and your family. Eric says it's going to cook the earth. Well, that's what scientists say. Yes. Thank you, Eric. Gnostic Native says a peaceful earthly kingdom is dependent on outside things, but Christ gives peace to individuals that can have no matter what, and it's much deeper and better feeling, contentment and inner peace. It's far bigger than earthly kingdom peacefulness. Absolutely. Thank you, Gnostic Native. 100%. This is why, at this point in time, and just a heart-to-heart talk, between me and you guys. At this point in time, I don't think it's a good I don't think it's a good thing to use the argument that Jesus will come back to fulfill those prophecies. Because this is the thing. I've seen a lot of videos on this. People go into Jewish communities and they quote unquote preach the gospel, and they're like, we don't think Yeshua was the Messiah because he didn't fulfill the prophecies. And they're like, well, what prophecies? Well, bringing in the exiles, bringing world peace, the worldwide utopia, become a king. He didn't become a king. And so the typical Christian response is basically, well, that will happen in the future. And I've seen so many Jews reply to that and say, you know what? If it does happen, if Jesus actually does physically come back, then yeah, of course, then I will say he's the Messiah. But until I see it, why should I believe it? Like, there's no evidence for that. And honestly, I think they have a really, really good point. If it's true that what the book of Revelation says, that the author of the book of Revelation said this will happen shortly. This will happen, the time is at hand. And he wrote that to the first century audience. So anyway, if all that stuff did happen already, that the term coming of the Lord is not a literal term. It's not talking about a literal bodily coming. And we talk about this often as we read through the scriptures, where we see this over and over and over again, where it says the coming of the Lord, the coming of the Lord. And we just read this earlier in the book of Ezekiel. The coming of the Lord is one thing. Clouds is another thing. These are figures of speech. These are euphemisms, or these are symbols that simply mean judgment. That's all. So the coming of the Lord, there were many comings of the Lord. When Adam and Eve, and that whole thing, again, I don't necessarily believe that's literal either, but even in a figurative sense, when Adam and Eve got judged, that was the coming of the Lord. The Lord came to Adam and Eve. The Tower of Babel, the Lord came and confused their language. That was the coming of the Lord. The flood of Noah, Sodom and Gomorrah, very clear there in Genesis chapter 18, where God says, I'm hearing all of these prayers. The outcry against this city is so great. I'm going to go down to see whether or not what I hear is true. If not, I will know. That's what it says in Genesis chapter 20, or chapter 18, excuse me. I'm thinking Genesis chapter 18, verse 20. So that's a coming of the Lord. He literally said, I'm going to go. I'm going to come down and see. Isaiah chapter 19, speaking about the judgment on Egypt, which already happened. It said, it used the term coming of the Lord, or the, let's pull this up here just for the sake of, I know this is a little bit of a rabbit trail here, but this is Isaiah chapter 19. Yeah, so right here, number 1, verse 1, the burden against Egypt. The word burden here means word, the word of God. Behold, the Lord rides on a swift cloud. Here he is coming in the clouds, and will come into Egypt. And then it goes on to explain what will happen to Egypt. It's all judgment on Egypt. And this already happened, by the way. So, anyways, back to the point. I don't think it's good for the Christian cause to say that Jesus will fulfill these prophecies, such as the Messiah will come to bring the utopian age, the peace on earth, and bringing in the exiles, and he will become a king, to sit on the throne of David, so to speak. I would say he already did all that. Did he not? I would say he already did all that. He already came as a Prince of Peace, if you will. He already brought in the exiles, as I explained earlier, the lost ones he brought home. He's seeking the lost sheep, so to speak. Spiritually speaking, bringing them into the kingdom. He's already king. But his kingdom is not of this world, and never will be of this world. This world is, at the very least, super incredibly, infinitesimally small. Online Debater says, hello, man, how are you? Hello, Online Debater. Not too bad. How are you doing? Blessings to you. Yeah, so I find that the Jews, they have a lot of great insight. It's theirs, as it says in Romans chapter 9, it's their covenant. The covenants, the word of God came through them, the Messiah came through them. All of it, it's all through them. However, I think that they miss it in certain places when they take things too literally. So we're reading from Sanhedrin 92b, and we're talking about the prophecy of the dry bones of Ezekiel chapter 37. And we already went through 6 different ways of interpretation, 6 different interpretations of it. We're unpacking one of those 6. This is Sanhedrin. This is from the ancient Jewish writings on this chapter and on the interpretation of this Sanhedrin 92b. So let's continue to read this, and we'll see. Let me know what you think of it in the live chat. Sanhedrin 92b, Rabbi Yitzhak says, molten gold should be poured into the mouth of that wicked person. You might say, what wicked person? Well, we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar here. It says, his mouth should be sealed in the course of an extraordinary death. In reference to royalty, Rabbi Yitzhak suggested that gold would be used to accomplish that task. The reason is that if an angel had not come and struck him on his mouth to prevent him from continuing his praise, he would have sought to overshadow all the songs and praises that David recited in the book of Psalms. The sages taught in the Bereta 6 miracles were performed on that day, that Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah were delivered from the furnace. Okay, we know that story in Daniel, the 3 Hebrew children, if you will, in the fiery furnace, all that kind of stuff. That's what this is talking about. So according to this, 6 miracles happened. And they are, the furnace rose from where it was sunken to ground level, and the furnace was breached, and its limestone dissipated, and the graven image that Nebuchadnezzar established, which he commanded his subjects to worship in Daniel chapter 3, fell on its face, and 4 ranks of officials from monarchies who stood around the furnace were burned, and Ezekiel revived the dead in the Dura Valley. So this is something I have never personally heard before. What about you guys in the live chat? You ever heard this stuff before? Online debater, please respect. We're on a certain topic here. If you have any questions or comments on a topic, we will address those. Moving on with the reading, it says, and the knowledge of all of the miracles were performed is based on tradition, and the 4 ranks of officials from monarchies that were burned is related in a verse, as it is written, quote, then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, and the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces, in Daniel chapter 3, verse 2. As it is written, they are certain Jews. They do not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image you have erected, Daniel chapter 3. And it is written in the verse after Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah left the fiery furnace, quote, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered and saw these men, unquote. Again, in Daniel chapter 3, this is in verse 27, who emerged from the fire unscathed. Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather 8 ranks of officials, and only 4 ranks witnessed Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah emerge from the furnace. Apparently, the other 4 ranks were burned in the fire. The school of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov teaches even during a period of danger, the person should not deviate from his prominence and demean himself, as it is stated, quote, then these men were bound in their mantles, their tunics, and their hats, and their other garments, and they were cast into the blazing fiery furnace. This is Daniel 3:21. Even when cast into the furnace, they donned garments befitting their situation. Okay, so to make it to summarize this, Sanhedrin 92b records a debate regarding the nature of the resurrection in Ezekiel chapter 37. Now, if you've just joined us here recently, this whole live stream is about Ezekiel chapter 37. We'll go on to chapter 38 and chapter 39 if time permits. But we read the Valley of Dry Bones, the prophecy of that in Ezekiel chapter 37. We have discussed 6 different interpretations of that, one of which is this, one of which is recorded in Sanhedrin 92b, debating the nature of the resurrection in Ezekiel chapter 37. So, in short summary, Rabbi Judah ben Bethera argues that the resurrection was a literal historical event, a miracle where literal dead bodies were revived. Again, this is a literal interpretation. I don't think it should be interpreted literally, but that's what that gentleman thought. Rabbi Eliezer agrees it was a literal revival of the dead, according to this passage. Rabbi Joshua ben Korah agrees, adding that the resurrected individuals actually stood up, sang a hymn, and eventually fathered children. Rabbi Judah, the dissenter, argues the passage is a parable. And this is where I would go on that side. I think that it's a parable and not a literal thing. He maintains that no actual resurrection occurred, literal resurrection. The imagery represents the exile and subsequent restoration of Israel. That's where I think that's what it really is all about. So I'm with Rabbi Judah on that one. Rabbi Nehemiah also argues that the vision is a parable, stating that the dead do not rise. Okay, so parables are like there's a in the Jewish world there's this what do you call it when a word just slipped my mind here. There's a word. It's used of in Passover especially. Haggadah, that's it. So a parable is like a Haggadah, and a Haggadah is basically a story that is told for an underlying purpose. So it's not necessarily a literal historical fact or event or story. Rather, it's just a story that's told for some other purpose. That purpose can be to teach a deeper spiritual truth, or it can be something like just as a means of emphasis, highlighting something, so to speak. I mean, you can tell a story to kind of pull something out of the woodwork, so to speak. So, anyways, this Sanhedrin 92b records the whole debate on Ezekiel chapter 37 between the literal and the figurative interpretations, and then record the dissenting voices, the figurative interpretations, to establish that while the literalist view became the dominant tradition for eschatology, the metaphorical interpretation has a formal place within rabbinic discourse. Online debater says, by the way, I respect you and love you, man. You are nice and humble. Thank you very much, online debater. I appreciate that. Hubert says, "Wow, me too. I'm in the parable camp." Yes, yeah. Thank you. Online debater asked about Sanhedrin. Said the temple rope stopped becoming white after the temple destruction after Jesus' crucifixion. Uh, that is not no. The Talmud does not say that in the Sanhedrin. It never really mentions Jesus in that context. We do have other live streams talking about what it actually says about Jesus, which basically is it's arguably nothing really. We hear a lot of rumors saying that the Talmud says this and that and the other thing about Jesus. Well, if you look at the profiles of what it's the so-called Yeshu or Yeshua that is spoken of there, it doesn't fit the same profile of the Yeshua of the New Testament. Online debater says, "What do you think about Targum Aramaic Bible? It's so fascinating and provide in-depth explanation." It does, yes. Yeah, thank you for the question, online debater. We do pull it up every once in a while here on the live streams. There was a point in time when we read from it almost every day here, and yeah, I do agree. It's a very fascinating and very interesting piece of literature for sure. Thank you. It's really good. Yeah, it's something that I would recommend studying for sure. Okay, so let's move on in our readings in Ezekiel chapter 37. Any other questions, especially in regards to Ezekiel chapter 37, the valley of dry bones? To reiterate the 6 different interpretations of it, just before we move on, because this is a very integral, very vital part of biblical eschatology, as I have been taught. So there are 6 different interpretations. I personally have only heard one interpretation. This is what happens, right? When you listen to some other Bible teacher or eschatology teacher, Bible end times Bible prophecy teacher. Normally, they'll only tell you one interpretation of the passage, the one that they want you to know. I'm telling you everything that I know, all the interpretations. We're laying it all out on the table here. We want everyone to see everything, and you guys can judge for yourself. So number 1, again, there's the national historical metaphor interpretation. It's the primary academic or contextual interpretation, and that interpretation goes like this. The Valley of Dry Bones, that whole prophecy is talking about the restoration of the Jewish people from the Babylonian exile back to the land of Israel. The quote-unquote bones represents the defeated nation. Number 2, literal bodily resurrection, classical Jewish. So we spoke a lot about that here. This is what Sanhedrin 92b was all about. I won't go into any more detail there. Number 3, the modern political and Zionist view. This teaches that it's the physical recreation of the state of Israel in 1948, and this is what I've been taught. Number 4, the spiritual regeneration view, which says that this whole prophecy is just about being born again, basically. The new birth of the individual believer. Number 5, the Christian eschatological interpretation, the future physical resurrection of the dead at the second coming of Jesus. So that one kind of mixes the end time Bible prophecy interpretation with the literal interpretation and saying, well, it will happen. It's one of those, it will happen when Jesus physically returns. And then there's the 6th interpretation, literary motif interpretation, otherwise known as the historical critical interpretation. which goes like this. It's a rhetorical and psychological device utilizing ancient Near Eastern divine warrior and restoration motifs to instill hope in a traumatized and conquered populace. Okay, let's move on. And by the way, folks, if you know of anybody, maybe a friend of yours or a neighbor or a coworker, it's someone that you think that would be interested in joining, watching, send them a link, post a link to this live stream on your social media feeds, or send them a text message, whatever you got to do. We're gonna read through a little bit more here in Ezekiel chapter 37, and Lord willing, we'll get into Ezekiel chapter 38. There are some meaningful manuscript variations as well that we're going to get into, which is also pertinent to every lover of Scripture. If you are a Bible, student, and you are not familiar with all of the manuscript variations and what that actually means and its implications to you, then make sure you stick around, because we're going to be talking about all that stuff as we always do. And by the way, make sure you subscribe and follow. Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 15. Yahweh's word came again to me, saying, "You, son of man, take one stick." So this is typical. We get this all the way through the book of Ezekiel. Yahweh's word, or as the King James would say, the Lord's word came to me, saying, "Son of man." So he's always addressed as the Son of Man. "Son of man, take one stick and write on it," quote, "for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions," unquote. "Then take another stick and write on it, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions," unquote. "Then join them for yourself to one another into one stick, that they may become one in your hand. When the children of your people speak to you, saying, 'Won't you show us what you mean by these?' tell them, the Lord Yahweh says, Behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his companions, and I will put them with it, with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they will be one in my hand. The sticks on which you will write will be in your hand before their eyes. Say to them, the Lord Yahweh says, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the nations where they have gone, and will gather them on every side, and bring them into their own land. I will make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel. One king will be king to them all. They will no longer be two nations. They won't be divided into two kingdoms anymore at all. They won't defile themselves anymore with their idols, nor will they were their detestable things, nor will any of their transgressions, but I will save them out of all their dwelling places in which they have sinned, and will cleanse them. So they will be my people, and I will be their God. So a couple things here, folks. Notice, we see this fairly often in the prophets as well. The prophecy is acted out. There's like something in the literal material world that is used to symbolize what's going on in the spiritual world. So this is amazing. It's like, baptism in typical Christian evangelical circles as well, is like that. Baptism is a literal material thing that symbolizes something else. In the live chat, going about the Valley of Dry Bones, Gnostic Native says, I think I would lean toward it being about being born again, Christ being formed in you, and the true Israel of God / body of Christ being realized as the true temple and people of God. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Gnostic Native. Gnostic Native says, so both personal for the individual and the group of the true believers. Amazing. That's great. Thanks again. Seek the Lord says shalom. Shalom, seek the Lord. Welcome and blessings to you and your family. Hope you're having an awesome afternoon, evening there. Seek the Lord. Yeah, so, okay. Verse 24. My servant David will be king over them. They all will have one shepherd. They will also walk in my ordinances and serve my statutes and do them. And yes, it is possible to actually obey the law, to obey the law of God. It says right there, it is possible. Contrary to, nominal Christian teaching, I'll read this again. And by the way, there is a manuscript variation here that we'll get to. But let's see this again. So God says, my servant David will be king over them. They will all have one shepherd. They will also walk in my ordinances. So this is talking about the Torah, the law of God, the ordinances, and observe my statutes. So they will walk in my ordinances and observe my statutes and do them. Period. Okay. Manuscript variations, folks. So we just read the WEB translation of the Masoretic Hebrew text. It says, my servant David will be king. The more ancient, the older Septuagint says, my servant David shall be a prince in the midst of them. You might say, same difference, king, prince, whatever. Not so fast, because we read this earlier on in the book of Ezekiel. Remember Ezekiel chapter, what was this now? 28? I'm thinking Ezekiel chapter 28, talking about the king of Tyre, the prince, and then the king, and then the prince and the king. Two different, well, it puts it two different ways anyway. Some people interpret that as to be there's two different people. There's the king of Tyre, then there's a prince. So, yeah, here we have David being the prince, not the king. Take it as you may. The Syriac, again, this is still older than the Masoretic Hebrew text, says, and my servant David shall reign over them. So it doesn't, so there, it's almost, it's typically like this, right? The Syriac typically takes the Masoretic and, or I shouldn't say the Masoretic, because the Masoretic didn't exist back in those days, but probably a proto-Masoretic Hebrew lineage takes that and the Septuagint and kind of mixes it into a hybrid. Again, folks, for those of you who are a little bit green here, so we got the Septuagint's the oldest, 2,000 years old, okay, 2,000 plus, depending on which book you're talking about, 2,000 plus years old. The Syriac is almost 2,000 years, about 1,800, 1,700 years old. The Latin, 4th century, okay, so it's old, but not as old as the Syriac, and the Syriac is not as old as the Septuagint. The Masoretic Hebrew text is the youngest, and a lot of people call this the original Hebrew. Yeah, so it's the youngest. So the Masoretic Hebrew text is what most English Bibles is based on. At least the Old Testament is, okay? Ezekiel especially is based upon that. Most English Bibles use the Masoretic Hebrew, which was finalized around the 10th century. Wow, it's not that old. So, yeah, so we got the Septuagint saying David is a prince, shall be a prince. Syriac says David just shall reign. So it kind of a little bit ambiguous there. It doesn't say king or prince. Latin Vulgate says that David shall be king. Now, the significance of these manuscript variations, because you might say, Christopher, why you talk about this, and what's the significance of this? Well, here the Septuagint translates the Hebrew melech, king, as archon, prince/ruler, consistently avoiding royal language in favor of leadership terms. This might reflect an anti-monarchical theological tendency in the Hellenistic Alexandrian stream, whereas the Masoretic, Syriac, and Vulgate preserve the monarchical title. Okay. Let's move on. Verse 25. 25. They will dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob, my servant, in which your fathers lived. They will dwell therein, they and their children and their children's children forever. David, my servant, will be prince forever. Okay, so here it says prince. Up here it says king. See that? So in verse 24 in the Masoretic text it says king. In verse 25 it says prince. Just out of curiosity, what about the Septuagint? Let's have a look here. So the Septuagint says prince in 24, and it says prince in 25. So it's consistent like that. The Syriac, the Peshitta, says, where are we here? Verse 24. So it just says, David, my servant, shall reign in verse 24. But verse 25, see, it doesn't say prince here. It doesn't say king either. It just says, and David, my servant, shall be their leader for eternity. All right. Well, there you have it. Yeah, so it's consistent in the other texts, but not in the Masoretic text. Verse 26. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It will be an everlasting covenant with them. I will place them, multiply them, and will set my sanctuary among them forevermore. See, no, okay. So, what do you think in the live chat? Do you think that this is literal or figurative? Because you know what? Maybe I should ask this instead. What does my sanctuary mean? Does that mean the literal physical temple, or does that mean God's dwelling amongst his people? Like he tabernacles among us, if you will. And do you think this has been fulfilled or not? I tend to lean towards the more of the figurative interpretation of this, like he lives among his people. His presence is with his people. Verse 27, my tent also will be with them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. The nations will know that I am Yahweh, who sanctifies Israel, when my sanctuary is among them forevermore. So I think that this is literal because, and I'm not just saying this just because I feel like, but I think I don't think it's literal. I think it's figurative because, again, I don't think that anything earthly can last forever. I don't think anything earthly can last forever. I think that this is talking about the real, true presence of God. He'll live with us, so to speak. I'll be with you, almost like how it says in Matthew, Matthew 28, behold, I'm with you till the end of the age. I'm with you forever, kind of thing. I will never leave you nor forsake you, kind of thing. Ezekiel chapter 38. Yahweh's word came to me saying, Son of man. Again, here we go. It's like a song. It's like the whole book of Ezekiel is like a song. It just keeps on. It's like this drum beat. It's like this riff that's always being played. Yahweh's word came to me saying, Son of man. Yahweh's word came to me saying, Son of man. Yahweh's word came to me saying, Son of man. It says this all the way through the book of Ezekiel. Set your face toward Gog or Gog of the land of Magog or Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshach, and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, the Lord Yahweh says, behold, I'm against you, Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshach, and Tubal. I will turn you around and put hooks into your jaws. I will bring you out with all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed in full armor, a great company with buckler and shield, all of them handling swords, Persia, Cush, and Put with them, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer and all his hordes, the house of Togarmah in the uttermost parts of the north and all his hordes, even many peoples with you. Okay, so it goes on to talk, talking about this whole thing. I'm going to interject this here. I have always been taught that this is yet to come, and it's part of the eschatological battle of Armageddon, basically. Or some people interpret it as part of Armageddon, some people interpret it as a different war, yet it is yet to come. And they believe that it's talking about like Russia invading Israel or something to that effect. There's different variations of it. What do you guys think? And what have you been taught? And I ask you about what have you been taught, not necessarily asking what is the truth or not, because I know many of us have been taught things that are not necessarily true. So, Gog and Magog. Verse 7, be prepared. Yes, prepare. Prepare yourself. You and your companies who are assembled to you, and be a guard to them. After many days you will be visited. In the latter years you will come into the land that is brought back from the sword, that is gathered out of many peoples on the mountains of Israel, which have been a continual waste, but it is brought out of the peoples, and they will dwell securely, all of them. You will ascend. You will come like a storm. You will be like a cloud to cover the land, you and all your hordes and many peoples with you. So here's a question. Before we answer the question, okay, no, I got two questions. Number one is Ezekiel chapter 38, the battle of Gog and Magog. What is this? What are the different interpretations of this? Has it already been fulfilled according to true, or I should say, academic scholarship, historical scholarship, has it already been fulfilled? And if so, what is the evidence of that? Has it, or is it yet to come? And what other interpretations do we have of this? And you notice here, so that's the first question. There's so much here. There's so much on my mind here. I'm trying to organize. What do I say first? It's just so exciting. So, the second question I will ask is this. Notice we have the pronouns here. You will ascend. You will come like a storm. So who is the you talking about here? Like all the way up, verse 8, after many days, you will be visited. Who is the you? Well, first of all, I think in order to answer that question, we should ask who is speaking and who is this person speaking to? And I think this will really help us to understand. This will really help us to understand the answer to the question, whether or not it has already been fulfilled or whether or not it's in the future. So, from the ground up, so to speak, from the foundation up, right from the very beginning here in verse 1, Ezekiel is speaking. And according to him, he says that God's word came to him. God spoke to him. Starting in verse 2. So God says, Son of man, set your face toward Gog and the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshach, and Tubal, and prophesy against him. And say, the Lord Yahweh says, behold, I'm against you, Gog. And then he goes on to say, I'm against you. I will turn you around. I will put hooks in your jaws. I will bring you out and with all your army. So this is talking about Gog, Magog. And it seems to me like this is the whole entire context of this is Ezekiel said that God said that he's supposed to say to Gog and Magog, Gog and Magog, all this stuff. So then we have to ascertain if this is for a future time, why did God tell Ezekiel this and not a future prophet? If this is for a future time, why did God tell Ezekiel and not Moses or Isaiah or anybody else for that matter? Why did he tell only Ezekiel? It seems to me more times than not, when we read the prophets, when God speaks to a certain prophet, in this case Ezekiel, it's God chose that particular prophet because God had a word for that prophet, or at least for his contemporaries, so that prophet can go out immediately and share the word to his world or to someone else in his generation. Otherwise, why would God say this stuff and not keep it until later? So that's another thing. One more thing here. It says in verse 9, you will ascend, you will come like a storm, you will be like a cloud. So here we go again, a cloud. That is referencing again another judgment, a judgment, some kind of horrific event that would happen. You will be a cloud. And I point this out because we see this well, I shouldn't say all the time, but quite frequently in the scriptures. Cloud simply means judgment, negative, with negative connotations. The Lord comes upon a cloud, judgment. You will be like a cloud to cover the land, you and all your hordes and many peoples with you. So, different interpretations. There are at least 4 primary interpretations to this. So, Ezekiel chapter 38 all the way to 39 is a prophetic vision describing a massive coalition of nations led by a mysterious figure named Gog from the land of Magog, invading a peacefully restored Israel. The invasion is defeated entirely by direct divine intervention. So we got earthquakes, fire, disease, not by human armies. So from a strictly academic scholarship point of view, from a historical point of view, and the consensus is that this has not been fulfilled. Academic and historical scholarship agrees this event never happened historically. Now, that's talking about literally anyways, okay? So the evidence for that is that simply the evidence is that there's no evidence that it happened. No historical, textual, or archaeological record of a multinational coalition invading post-exilic Israel and being wiped out by supernatural cosmic phenomena. Okay. So, our next question what are the interpretations of it? And let me know in the live chat. I'm talking about what have you been taught? Not necessarily what you currently believe, but rather what have you been taught? Right hand of God says, Happy Sunday, Christopher. Hello, right hand of God. Right hand of God says, I think it's the battle of Russia and Iran with a question mark. Iran. Thank you, right hand of God. Okay, yeah, so what as far as I see here, as far as I know, there are at least 4 different interpretations of this passage. And okay, if you're new to this channel and you're wondering why I just lay it out like this, is because we're not here to just like force a dogma, okay? Excuse me. Most Christian teachers and many other religious kind of teachers, by the way, they force it, like it's like they say, well, this is it, and they don't even tell you about the other ways of thinking or the other ways of interpreting it. They just this is the truth, but they don't. A lot of times they don't even give you evidence for that either. They just tell you this is it. This is the narrative. Believe it. We're not like that. What we do here is we want to take that diamond and we want to look at it from every angle so that we know it really well. We want to look at every angle of interpretation here so that we can say, hey, maybe there's something I didn't think about here. Maybe there's something I don't know about this passage. Maybe I can learn from someone else's point of view. That's the whole key here. So, number 1, the academic, historical, critical interpretation of this passage. Scholars view this as early apocalyptic literature, not a prediction of a literal military event. I'll say this again. Scholars view this as an early apocalyptic literature, not a prediction of a literal military event. In other words, more of almost like a parable. Gog is an archetype for the ultimate enemy of God. The name may be a cipher derived from Gyges, 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 an ancient king of Lydia, known as Gugu in Akkadian. Gugu, Gyges, Gog. See, it's very, very similar. The text was written to assure traumatized Judean exiles that Yahweh would ultimately defeat all forces of chaos. Again, just like a parable, not a literal event. A story, basically a story based upon something that's true, God's protection and God's provision, and God's got everything under control, just to to speak peace into the lives of the people. That was number one. Number two is the classical Jewish interpretation, otherwise known as messianic eschatology. And that goes like this: a final climactic future war that occurs just before or during the messianic age is viewed as the ultimate purging of evil and the final event that proves God's sovereignty over the entire world. Number three, remember we have 4 points here. Number three, modern dispensational Christian interpretation. I got to chuckle because personally I think dispensationalism is just a horrifically flawed doctrine. Anyway, the dispensationalists will tell you this. They view the text as a blueprint for a literal, impending World War III scenario. Proponents frequently attempt to map Ezekiel's ancient tribal names to modern geopolitical states, most commonly identifying Magog with Russia and Persia with Iran or Iran. Critical scholars universally reject this mapping as anachronistic and linguistically flawed. Number four, the fourth and final one that I know about, anyway, that I have here. Again, let me know if there's anything different that you guys have been taught. Let me know in the live chat or in the comment section afterwards. Number four, the allegorical or spiritual interpretation. And this is also known as, excuse me, interestingly enough, this is also known as the historic Christian interpretation. Historic Christian interpretation, popularized by Augustine and reflected in Revelation chapter 20. This is what they say. Gog and Magog represent the totality of worldly opposition to the church throughout history, climaxing in a final spiritual defeat at the end of time. Okay. Yeah, there's 4 interpretations of it. Gnostic Native says, I agree with you, Chris. I spent about 10 years attending an ultra-dispensationalist church. All right. Well, okay. I can just imagine. Okay, so you came from there, and now you're here. That's awesome. That's great. Well, you know what? I used to attend a dispensationalist church as well. I wouldn't say I spent 10 years there, though, but yeah, I fell into it as well. I believed it. At least I think I believed it for a certain period of time, but not very long, because what really got me thinking about it was reading the scriptures about the eternal aspects of, especially of the law of God and the word of God. Like, it's eternal. And how the grace of God is found, so the grace and the love and the mercy and all of that good stuff is found so much in the quote unquote Old Testament. Let me give you an example. Psalms. The praises that they sang to God in the quote unquote Old Testament is even, I mean, you could argue that it's even more praising the grace and the love and the mercy of God more than what we read in the New Testament, so to speak. Like, for he is good and his love endures forever. For he is good and his mercy endures forever. Over and over and over again. Also, the aspect of the law still being in effect, and that Yeshua still taught the law, not only in the Gospels, but also the implications of the law were still there, and no idolatry and no immorality and repentance, all that stuff from the law is even found later on, even to the in the book of Revelation, chapter 2 and chapter 3, the message of Yeshua to the churches. And so I started thinking about that. I'm thinking, wait a second. So we got a lot of mercy and love and eternal aspects in the so-called Old Testament, and then we have the law in the quote-unquote New Testament. So what's up with this whole thing about the age of the law and the age of grace and all this kind of? It's like, I just had to say, no, that can't be. That can't be right. Thank you, Gnostic Native. I appreciate that. So, before we get too far here, the manuscript variations that we have so far, way back to verse 2, Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 2. Son of man, set your face toward Gog and the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh. In the Septuagint, it says Ros, R-H-O-S. The Syriac doesn't say Rosh at all. It doesn't say Rosh or Rosh or anything like that at all. The Syriac says, Son of man, set your face against Gog and against the land of Magog, the ruler and the head of Meshach and of Tubal, and prophesy upon him and say, I like that. Because, I personally I think that names should be translated a little bit more than transliterated, because you read about it in the scriptures, you look at all the names, and each name is not just a word that you pronounce. It has deep meaning. So to translate it, a lot of times gives it the meaning is in the meaning. I don't know how else to say that. To translate it and to get the real meaning of the name, like, for example, this: what if Rosh is not really what it's supposed to be at all? What if this is right? What if the Syriac is right? What if there's no Rosh, the prince of Rosh? What if there is no Rosh? Ras is the Septuagint says. What if the original text, the original author simply meant that Gog is the ruler and the head of Meshach? Because Rosh means head. Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, right? So Rosh in the Hebrew means head. So that just brings it. Can you imagine if that? Do you think we stumbled on a truth here, folks? You think we stumbled on a truth? Because what do you call that interpretation? We read this, the dispensationalist interpretation that says that Magog is Rosh, and Rosh is another form of Russia. It sounds familiar, right? I mean, it sounds similar, is what I mean. Rosh in Russia. But according to critical scholars, they say that that's linguistically flawed. That should not be that's not a true connection there, you know. And the anachronistic the mapping of the geopolitical states is anachronistic. So what if the truth of the matter is Ezekiel just simply meant that Gog was the ruler and the head of Meshach? Not that there was any Rosh, whatever in there at all. And that lesser educated, unknown to them dispensationalists came around and go, oh, Rosh, oh, that's got to be Russia. Not even knowing that that's not the way the Hebrew works anyway. It has nothing to do with it. It's not even a proper name. Can you imagine if that's the case? So that's just another nail in the coffin of the dispensationalist Christian interpretation of this. Look at this, folks. Even Jerome, believe it or not, even good old Jerome, Roman Catholic. So Roman Catholic, well, I shouldn't say Roman Catholic Jerome, but Roman Catholics love Jerome anyway. But look at this. Even Jerome didn't put Rosh or Rush or whatever in there. He said the chief prince of Meshach. So he translated Rosh instead of transliterating Rosh, making it sound like a place. Wow. That is amazing, folks. That is absolutely amazing. How awesome is that? How many people have been taught that this Rosh is just an ancient word for like some kind of etymological ancient name for Russia, when it's simply just a Hebrew word that means head or chief of this, chief of Meshach, head of Meshach. Yeah, so the significance, of course, great significance here, a massive eschatological and geographical split. The Hebrew consonantal word Rosh is translated as a proper noun, Rosh, in the Septuagint, identifying a specific kingdom. The Syriac and the Latin Vulgate translate it as a common noun, head or chief. The Vulgate's Principem Capitis means chief prince, the chief prince of Meshach, or chief. So this is awesome, folks. Who knew? Who knew? And this is why, I always, I shouldn't say always, but I to some degree I resent how some of these Bible translators, they transliterate words instead of translating it, making it look like a name and not, this is amazing. Let's look in the Hebrew. I'm going to pull up the Hebrew. Chipmunk says, Rosh is one of those words most can't agree on the meaning. I always heard it was Russia, but then would ask how did they come to that conclusion? Yeah, within the text, I think that the problem lies, Chipmunk, with the people who take it as the transliterated word instead of the translated word. So the word rosh in the Hebrew is a common Hebrew word that is used. It's the meaning of it's quite clear. If let's go into the Hebrew here. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Chipmunk. I know that there's a lot of people out there that they would argue on that rosh versus rosh, whatever the meaning is. So here it is in Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 2, the interlinear Hebrew. So let's go down to where it says rosh. Okay, right here. Strong's Hebrew 72:18. Let's see. Let's dig into this. What does this say? So, interesting etymology here. It says from an unused root apparently meaning to shake. I always go to the Gesenius's Hebrew Chaldee lexicon. In my opinion, it's very very thorough. As you can see, look at this. It's very thorough in its. So the word rosh. Okay, so it's used in this one proper name, meaning the height in the south, the head of the south. Uh, it says here, right here, it means to be the head or leader, to be over. The head of men or animals in Genesis 3, Genesis 28, Genesis 40, and so very frequently. To give upon one's head, to repay him his evil deeds. In Ezekiel chapter 9, chapter 11, chapter 16, chapter 17, chapter 22. Compare it with Psalm chapter 7, verse 17. Also a phrase, as to the phrase, okay, with the danger of our heads. Again, it's so far all we have here is that it means head of our life. The head of a man. Figuratively, head is used wherever. Number 2, whatever is highest and supreme. So that's the second one. So the first one is head. The second meaning highest and supreme. The prince of the people. 1 Samuel 15. Isaiah 7. Or simply head or prince. Chief of a family. Exodus 6. Verses 14 and 25. Numbers chapter 7. Chapter 32. Chapter 36. High priest. So that's used in high priest, Rosh. 2 Chronicles 19. 2 Chronicles 24. Chief city, Rosh city, in Joshua 11. Isaiah 7, verse 8. The highest place, the high place, or the highest place. Job 29, verse 25. I sat the highest, the Rosh, right here it says. I sat the highest in the first place. Lamentations 1:5. Her adversaries, they hold the first place. So first, head, chief, prince. This is what it means. They triumph. Okay. The head or summit of a mountain in Genesis chapter 8. Of a tower, Genesis chapter 11. That'd be the Tower of Babel. Rosh, the head of the tower. The Rosh of the tower. So I don't think that would mean the Russia of the tower, right? I don't think any of this stuff would mean Russia. And this is probably why scholars say that it's just linguistically false to say that Rosh or Rosh has anything to do with Russia. 1 Kings chapter 9, of an ear of corn, the head of so that'd be like the head of the corn. Job 24:24, the headstone or the cornerstone. Chief joy in Psalm 137. Most excellent spices, that'd be the head spices. Ezekiel 27:22. Chipmunk says head of a country, king, authority. Yes, that's what it means literally. Yes, thank you, Chipmunk. Yeah. Number 3, it can also mean the sum or amount. The whole number, that which is the highest. Metaphorically, the sum of words, a multitude, host, band, especially of soldiers. Number 4, what is the first and foremost, the beginning, commencement? 4 beginnings of streams, 4 lesser rivers and 4 larger spreads itself arms. This is Genesis chapter 2, speaking about the heads of the remember that, the heads of the rivers. The rivers come to the head. So the rivers come to a head. This is one of the reasons why I don't think that the Garden of Eden is literal, because there's nowhere on earth that those rivers actually come to a head. But it would be that Hebrew word rosh. So, and I don't think that they come to Russia either. So I think it's talking about coming to a head. The beginning. Number 5, the 5th definition of this word. It's used, so used once for distinction's sake. It's also the name of a poisonous plant, growing quickly and luxuriantly, of bitter taste. Lamentation 3:5, on this account frequently connected with wormwood. Lamentation 3:19, as I judge neither. The poppy, so called from its heads. The juice of poppies, opium. And it could be figuratively a poison of any kind because of that. Isn't that amazing? So in all of this, I don't see the word Russia anywheres in here. Nothing. Here's a good write-up from Jacinius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon. As you can see, I didn't read everything here, but I'm scrolling through it. If you're listening to the live stream or the video afterwards, you can pause and read it for yourself if you want. Zoom in and check it out. Nothing here says Russia. I did not see Russia at all. So it seems like the scholars are right that interpreting this word in Ezekiel chapter 38 as Russia is just false. Plain old bad linguistic gymnastics. It's just not, it just doesn't work. It's like taking the Spanish word El, or part of the name El, and saying that it means God, because Hebrew El is also God, you see. Two totally different things. Sounds the same, but totally different things. Chipmunk says, I think people that see it as Russia use other scriptures to bring it in, Jacob and Esau. Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what kind of scriptures they would use for that. Thank you for sharing, Chipmunk. Right hand of God says Chernobyl in English means wormwood. I heard that before. That's interesting. Thank you, right hand of God. I appreciate that. Yeah, what an amazing passage here we got. Gog, Magog, the different interpretations of it, Rosh. Thanks to Chipmunk, we did a deep dive into the word Rosh. I knew that it meant first or head before, but I didn't read the whole entire Gesenius's entry there on that word. So amazing stuff. We only got like what, partway through Ezekiel 38. Yeah, we didn't get too far into it. So, all right, what we're going to do, because this is such an extensive chapter and in such a lengthy topic, we're going to save the rest till tomorrow. Okay? We'll come back tomorrow, the same time, same place, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. That's 7:30 p.m. New York time, and we will pick up where we left off here in the middle of Gog. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. Really amazing stuff. Thanks, guys, in the live chat. You guys are awesome. Okay. Any final questions, comments about this, what we just read here, Magog, Gog, all that kind of stuff? Let me know in the live chat. If you are interested in any of this kind of stuff, make sure that you subscribe and follow, and make sure that you have the notifications on if you want to be notified when we are live. All right, folks. So tomorrow we'll be back, Lord willing, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Until then, keep on calling on him, and he will show you great and mighty things that you don't know. Jeremiah 33:3. You guys are awesome. You guys are world changers. Much love. Okay, folks. Yes, in the near future, we got Ezekiel. We're going to go into the third temple here very, very shortly after this whole thing about the Gog and Magog and all that kind of stuff. Talking about the third temple, talking about the prince in the third temple, which is commonly interpreted as the Messiah. And I'm also going to drop a little bomb, if you will, so to speak, figuratively speaking, in regards to what it says about this prince. I know some of you know what I'm going to say. You know what I'm going to be talking about, because we touched on it a few times in the past. Okay, folks, you guys are awesome. Chipmunk says, thank you for another awesome study. I like doing the deep dives into the nooks and crannies. Many blessings to you and family. Good rest and awesome start to a new week. All, thank you very much, Chipmunk, and you too as well. Have a wonderful night, good rest, good health, blessings multiplied to you and yours. Have a great day tomorrow as well. Thanks, Chipmunk. And Felix says, thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Felix. I appreciate that. Blessings again to you and your family. Hope all is well over there. Al says, thank you, Brother Christopher, for another excellent study. Appreciate you. Appreciate for all you do. Have a great night, everyone. Great health, and God bless you all. Thank you very much, Al. I appreciate that. And multiplied back to you as well, Al. Great night, good rest, good health, and many more blessings poured upon you and your family. You guys are awesome. Love you guys. Okay, guys, we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, I pray the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, lift up his countenance upon you, and give you wonderful, wonderful shalom. Amen, amen. We'll see you guys tomorrow.